Hi, my name is Tamara. I'm from the weather station, and I'd like to play Robber from my album Ignorance.
I never believed in the robber. I never saw nobody climb over my fence.
Some musicians write songs after a lover's tiff or an encounter with a great work of art. Tamara Lindeman was compelled to write after reading an article about a fossil fuel company.
I left you back at home because I simply could not do it.
Ignorance is the majestic fifth album by the Canadian singer-songwriters folk project, The Weather Station. It explores the personal implications of the climate crisis, human existence encroaching on nature, and generations robbed of a sustainable future. Tamara Lindeman, hello.
Hi.
Now, congratulations on this album. It feels very timely, very welcome, with moments of calm and beauty, but talking about a vital subject. Start by telling us about the name, Ignorance. Is it confrontational?
I did think it was confrontational to name my album that, but I think that's what's interesting about a title. Why title something that a word that just sits there? Why not use a title as a chance to talk about something that you think is important and that's related to the music? So I think that's part of why I didn't mind the confrontational quality of the title.
The focus of the album is climate grief. You've been studying the climate crisis, attending town halls and leading panel discussions with fellow musicians and activists in Toronto. You also read a devastating report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change about the consequences of elevated carbon levels for human societies. How did all this affect the album and the direction of the music?
I didn't know that I was going to write an album about this. I don't think I even knew that the songs, that this is what they meant to me as I began writing them. It just was the emotional universe in which I was living at the time. When you actually turn and face the climate crisis, which is something, of course, I've known about my whole life, but when you actually look at it and you actually dig into what these statistics actually mean for human beings and all living life on this planet, it's extremely overwhelming. And I experienced, what many people around the world call climate grief, where you understand what's really going to happen and you feel it on a deep emotional and personal level. So that was where I was when I wrote the songs, and they, to me, speak to that experience.
The opening song is Robber. Tell us, who is being robbed and of what?
What I was thinking about, honestly, when I wrote the song was Exxon, the company of Exxon in the 80s. At the time of my birth, they were studying climate change, realizing that the science was real, and then created an entire disinformation campaign to convince the public that the science was not real, even though internally they agreed with it and had verified it. So that robbery I would characterize as robbery, because they robbed my generation and the rest of generations to come from the truth and from a future that we can count on as resembling in some ways the past. I don't think that song really even comes close to explaining that, but it does touch it in my opinion. And I think more importantly, what the song is about is my own naivete of believing that people in power and leaders had our best interests at heart.
What about President Biden then? Do you think his arrival will improve things in North America?
I do, actually, because, the US has obviously been a very recalcitrant non-participant in all of the international climate agreements. And Biden, what I found interesting about him was that he really campaigned on climate action. And I'd never seen an American president do that before. In Europe and Canada, we've seen politicians campaign on climate action and then do very little. But I do have a certain amount of hope that he's listening to the right young activists. He's trying to make some interesting appointments to his cabinet. So I do have hope that the tide might be shifting, and more than anything, that the tide of denial and not mentioning it, the climate silence that was so pervasive in our culture up until very recently has finally been cracking a bit. And we're starting to talk about this in ways we never did when I was younger.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer.
One thing I love about the album is you're reacting to this serious problem, discussing the severity of the facts, but the music is a bit like a therapy. It's a bit like a meditation. You've called Parking Lot a love letter to a bird.
Waited outside the club in a parking lot. I watched some bird fly up and land on the rooftop.
It's about how the degradation of the natural world is so commonplace that we barely notice it, that we feel helpless. It all seems aimless. Do you feel helpless?
Of course, I feel helpless as one human. I can't turn this ship around and hold us to 1.5 degrees personally. But, you know, I think that song and a lot of the songs are really about trying to dig into just the reality of my generation and my life on this planet, where, you know, being born in the 80s, I was born into a world that already was under threat. But nobody talked about that in the way that I think we should have been. That song was written from the heart. I wasn't trying to say some massive thing with it, but I love that it does have resonance for people, because I think it is a real feeling of encountering nature and then feeling this immediate sadness, which we shouldn't have to feel, because we are a part of nature, and, you know, humans through history have turned to the natural world for beauty and companionship, and I wish we could too, in the same way.
It just kills me now.
You directed the videos of the songs yourself, and you do have experience of the world of filmmaking because you're an actress. As a teenager, you played Tilda Swinton's daughter in the thriller The Deep End, and the title character in Guinevere Jones, a TV show about a high schooler with magical powers. Tell us how you became an actress and how your transition to music happened.
I grew up in small town Ontario, and you know, I was a bit of a misfit when I got into high school, and I basically just wanted any escape from having to go to my small rural high school, where I didn't have any friends. So I had gotten into community theater in part through singing in choirs, and that led me to know other kids who had gotten an agent and gotten into TV. So I was like, well, I can do that too. So I became an actor when I was 13 and had a long, strange, wandering career through acting up until my mid-20s. I moved to Toronto, and, you know, was going to university, and I fell deeply in love with music, and I just became obsessed with this idea that somehow I would become a musician. I made a record on my computer over the course of 4 years, very slowly learned to play guitar and learned to sing in front of people, and it's been a very long, slow journey towards actually being a musician, but I did actually pull it off.
I should get all this dying out of my mind. I should really know better than to read the headlines. Doesn't matter if I see, or really can I not just cover my eyes?
And you've spoken on social media about how your income as a young actress, a child actress, really helped you make it as a musician. Do you think if you didn't have those savings, you wouldn't have made it this far?
I think people see musicians and assume that they're getting paid and they're making money from what they do. And I wanted to point out that the money we make tends to be very marginal. You know, we have really high expenses. It's very difficult to make any kind of, you know, shard of money for yourself. And what I've noticed looking around the music industry is a lot of people increasingly who are in music have some sort of trust fund or family wealth. For me, instead of having to come home from a tour where I made $50 and having to go back to work at the coffee shop, that financial stability absolutely helped me to discover my art and to, make mistakes and fail and learn and grow.
So Tamara, just before we go, we always ask our guests their cultural pick of the moment. What have you chosen for us?
I wanted to mention a new album that's coming out. It's by the Toronto band Bernice, and it's called Ode de Bongiorno. And, Bernice has been a real inspiration of mine for many years. I love what they do. I feel like they just bring a breath of fresh air into music. Everything they do is airy and unusual and very earnest and sincere and very experimental at the same time. And it's always beautiful. Robin Dan is one of my favorite vocalists and favorite writers. And everything that Bernice does, I love because it's so unlike anything I would do. And so I draw a lot of inspiration from them.
Okay, we're going to play out with that. Tamara Lindeman, it's been a pleasure to have you. The Weather Station's new album is called Ignorance.
Thank you.
What I need to convey, okay, it's so much less simple to give yourself the same